Would the 1975 Nova Scotia women's hockey team please come up here, along with your coach and your manager? Would you all come forward, please? Is that the intention? You get them all up here?
Nancy Tokaryk and Wilfred Hoare.
I thought we were going to stand them all out front and then have them up on the stage. All of you come on up front. You two get the chairs. Come on up. You know, just... The 1975 Nova Scotia field hockey team, ladies and gentlemen, should have had the phrase "Together Forever" tattooed somewhere under the bloomers they wore. This team formed in stages from 1970, when 6 of them first played under Coach Fahie to Blacklock. They kept adding 1 or 2 each year, getting better and better, until their great triumph in 1975, and still, 25 years later, they party together every Christmas season. They fought among themselves, they'd cried, both in frustration and because they laughed so hard they couldn't help it. And in fact, they continued to play along into old ladydom, the same basic group entering the Canadian over 30 Masters Championships as soon as they were old enough. At the Masters Tournament in 1986, they proved to be less than perfect hosts when they avenged an overtime loss to BC they'd suffered the year before. They blew through the round robin with a 3-1 record to face the Toronto Merrimads in the National Senior Final. The Ontario club was considered tough, even though their round robin record was only 2-1-1. A penalty shot was awarded to Nova Scotia after Toronto goalie Dawn Garnham tackled Kimmer Robson when she had a breakaway. The hometown crowd at Smooth Stadium had little sympathy for Garnham, even when she needed 5 minutes to come to her senses after the collision. Joan Langley scored on the resulting 21-foot penalty shot with just 1 second to go in the first half. Toronto came back and tied it in the third period. Then Kim Robson put the winner away off the hand of the Toronto goalie to give Nova Scotia the Canadian Senior Championship. 32-year-old Joan Langley, just 2 months after her second daughter Sarah was born, had played a full 70 minutes at center half. But that jumps way ahead of the story, and singling out a few players is not what this team is all about. There are things about this group which transcend their athletic accomplishments in many ways. Everyone up here on stage still resides in Nova Scotia. They may well constitute the greatest collection of builders of women's sport ever assembled on a podium. 7 of them have been on the NSFHA executive. 13 of them have coached junior high and high school teams. 7 of them are umpires, 4 of them at the international level. 5 of them have coached Canada Games teams. 8 of them are licensed PE teachers. 1 is a university athletic director. 5 have coached at the university level. Several coach mini teams. In fact, 1 started Grasshopper mini field hockey for girls. Another is the president of the Melba Basketball Association. They are unusual in many other ways as well. When the first of them got together in the early 70s, they became known across Canada as the Bargers, because they seemed to barge in and take over in any venue. As it turned out, they started taking over many of the games as well. Upper Canadian and Western officials didn't know what to do with them. They were certain they weren't playing field hockey as it had always been played in the British tradition. Being Maritimers, they all came from athletic backgrounds which saw them playing every sport in its season. They played field hockey, yelling to and at each other like basketball players. They intentionally hit the ball out of bounds to regroup the defense like soccer players. They gave high fives and hugs and slaps at each other after successful plays like volleyball players. They partied like rugby players. They didn't do anything they were supposed to do, and yet they won hockey games. When New Brunswick and Nova Scotia met in the finals in BC in 1974, in the Nationals, both captains were called into the tent at halftime and told to quiet their teams down, or the tournament officials were going to stop the game and award each team a loss. The discipline was about the noise level, not because any abusive language was being used, but just because the ladies' field hockey way of behaving was being challenged. The thing that most upset them was that the Maritime teams not only partied with all of their hearts, they played with all of their hearts as well. New Brunswick-Nova Scotia games were the hardest ever fought in Canada. But it was the defeated New Brunswick players who somehow found Nova Scotian tartan skirts during the 1975 national final so they could lead the cheering for their blue-nosed rivals. Nova Scotia hockey players always had fun. In 1972, after a Calgary tournament, they virtually took over the hotel bar after letting it slip that Katie Didkowski was really Marina Murray, Anne Murray's sister. The all-male group took Marina into the men's dressing room to rehearse and then accompanied her when she sang Snowbird to the delighted crowd. Eventually, the professional group gave up the stage to the team as they sang Requests All Night. Late in the evening, a public announcement was made asking Marina to come to the front desk for a message from Glenn Campbell. Didkowski, whose room had been pilfered earlier that day, was confronted by the hotel manager, who gave her money equal to the missing amount because he said the bar had never done so well. It got to the point that mythology preceded them. Ill-founded rumors had it that Anne MacKinnon once roller-skated down the stairs on the Haligonian too, and that during another sing-fest in St. John, a barrel had fallen off the wall and hit Joss Webb right in the nose. Some said that bowling matches in the halls became an annual affair. Lies. Lies. And at one time, a few team members who'd been good, who'd gone straight to bed, were roasted and spent several hours in a hotel bar drinking in their pajamas. Couldn't be true. There were two things the officials found difficult to understand. The first was that the group comprised disparate individuals ranging in personalities from Mama Rice and Bag MacKinnon to St. Joan the Pure. And yet they got along like a close-knit family at Christmas time. The second was the part that really rankled. They worked just as hard as they played. They worked very hard in practice, and come game time, they stuck their noses in where likely pain made others more timid. In 1975 alone, 8 of them were named as Canadian All-Stars. The team was made up of nothing but superstars and had enjoyed great sporting success throughout their rich and varied athletic careers, yet none had ego problems. The one who made the final selections for this dream team is the only man here with them tonight, Coach Wilfred Hoare. Mr. Hoare, would you please take one step forward? This man, ladies and gentlemen, was once accurately described in Pat Connolly's Daily News column as the coach who changed the face of field hockey in Canada. This August, he'll be 80 years old. As Nancy Tokaryk put it, in his funny old English way, he made us believe in ourselves. Coach Hoare brought a wealth of experience to the job at hand. At the time he took charge of this gang of rapscallions, he could look back on years of playing, teaching, and coaching. As a young man, he'd played field hockey at the county level in England. He'd coached the Canadian Armed Forces Championship Greenwood soccer team before returning to England to further his studies. In August 1972, he just returned to Nova Scotia with a London University phys ed degree. In his application for the Nova Scotia coaching job, he stated that if given the job, he'd take the game from the 1930s to the 1970s in one season. When the selection team asked him if he preferred to coach men or women, he said, "It doesn't matter, I coach people." That statement, more than anything else, got him the job. In his first meeting with his newly elected squad, he said that if they listened to him, they'd be Canadian champions in 4 years. He lied. It didn't take that long. As I read your name with the rest of you, step forward, join your coach. Gene Fahie, described as the greatest team manager ever. Debbie Machon, Kim Robson, Susan Beazley, Leslie Archibald, Diane Boulanger, Helen Castonguay, all forward. Step forward. Halfbacks, Judi the Mama Rice, Karen Greenman, St. Joan Langley, Nancy Tokaryk, Joss Webb. Step forward. Fullbacks, Kathy Train Mullane, and the bag MacKinnon. Goalie, Katie Didkowski. All of these women, ladies and gentlemen, have played university field hockey at either Dal, Smoo, or St. X. Collectively, they've played for 62 seasons on a provincial team. They've played on 14 Canada Games teams, and they have played for the Canada national team for a collective 17 years. In 1973, they were only 6 weeks after the Canada Games to prepare them for the Nationals. Nova Scotia finished 5th, showing potential, but lacking team mobility. In 1974, they won the Maritime Tournament. In the winter of '74, they practiced in the old St. Mary's gym. And then at Easter time, they went to Bermuda. A Bermuda trip was something most of them have been doing since 1972, when they were coached by Paul Adams. They then repeated the practice 5 or 6 times over the years. Eventually, they were joined by teams from other countries, until finally, the Bacardi International Field Hockey Tournament for both men and women emerged. It has become the most successful tournament of its type in the world. The Bermuda press described their first trips as a learning experience for the young Nova Scotia visitors. In '74, the shoe was on the other foot. Bermuda kept throwing better and better teams at them, but in the end, this Wilfred Hoare coached Nova Scotia squad won all 11 games they played in 10 days, even against the Bermuda under-23 team and then the Bermuda national team. Of course, their old habits didn't die just because they were out of the country. For those who've never been to Bermuda, suffice it to say that tourists are not permitted to rent cars, but only motor scooters. Motor scooter adventures for this group include Sue Beazley once hitting a curb, flying over the handlebars into a big rose bush. Judi Mama Rice once going round and round and round and round a roundabout because she didn't know where she was, and she was sure that if she got off in the wrong street, she'd be lost in perpetuity. This intelligent bunch of university grads also left a couple of their bikes locked and running during one of their whole hockey games. I've been sworn to secrecy on some of the stories, but if you stay long enough tonight, their tongues will loosen up and you'll remain convinced that they maintain their party hard, play hard reputation. The Nationals in '74 were held at Thanksgiving time in BC. Nova Scotia played the game of their lives against a very strong Ontario team. In fact, Ontario so dominated that we only got the ball out of their end one time during the whole of the game. But on that occasion, Kimmer Robson scored. The rest of the country was beginning to learn how tough it was to score against Nova Scotia, as the one goal stood for a Blue Nose 1-0 victory and a playoff berth. In the semifinal, they were beating the favorite home team at the half 2-0, but then gave up 3 goals on corners to finish third in the nation. Many young Nova Scotian teams would have come home proud and content with that showing, but it only made this group grit their teeth in preparation for '75, when they could look forward to hosting the Nationals on the Halifax Commons. As soon as the weather permitted the following spring, they were back at it. Early practices saw them running 2,000 yards, always passing the ball or receiving it. By midsummer, they were up to 6,000 yards of practice. Coach Hoare arranged a lot of scrimmages against the Nova Scotia men's team, which helped make them absolutely fearless when they played against women. During the summer, they defeated the Irish national team in New Brunswick, and then on one evening on the Common, they tied Scotland and became the only provincial squad to defeat the Canadian national team on their cross-country tour. At last, the time came for the national championships. To cement their togetherness, they all stayed in the Holiday Inn with the rest of the teams, since tournament chair Ann McVicker had seen to it that all the teams had rooms facing out on the Commons where the games were to be played. In true Blue Nose fashion, this group partied themselves hoarse, singing "Thank God I'm a Country Boy." But then they got to bed early so that Sue Beazley could get up in time to have her pre-game ice cream sundae for breakfast. Day 1 was sunny and bright in 4, Nova Scotia. Day's end saw them tie Quebec 0-0 and then win on penalty shots in the morning. And then beat Manitoba 1-0 on a Sue Beazley shot, proving that her choice of training meal must have been the right one. That night, the rains came, and they stayed for the rest of the tournament. Day 2 saw Nova Scotia tie Alberta 0-0 and then beat them on penalty shots. Both teams moved into the playoffs. Nova Scotia's semi-final opponent was BC, the team which had beaten them 3-2 in '74. The best defense in the nation held their ground despite incessant pressure from a very determined West Coast squad. The game ended once again 0-0. And once again, 5 penalty shots by each team were to determine the winner. The coin was flipped. BC led off with a goal. Score 1-0. Joan Langley was Nova Scotia's first shooter. She scored. Score 1-1. Both shooters missed in the second and then again in the third. Round 4 saw BC score, taking the lead 2-1. Boulanger tied it 2-2. Sue Jamieson, BC's last shooter, was the national team player who took all of Canada's penalty shots in international contests. She shot and Didkowski stopped it, leaving Mama Rice with the toughest shot of her career. The hometown crowd went mad as she slammed it home, assuring Nova Scotia of at least a silver and a real shot at the gold. The BC press were so astounded that their powerhouse club had been beaten by Nova Scotia that they phoned for confirmation, suspecting a practical joke of some sort. The night before the final game is always banquet time at the Nationals. The Holiday Inn dining room was abuzz with expectation because our group of extroverts here had always come up with some sort of surprise entertainment. Having shouted themselves hoarse during the tournament and being singularly focused on the next day's final, they were beside themselves as to what they were going to do to maintain their rep. When their turn came, they announced they were going to do a maritime version of Silent Night. They came out and in practiced unison, they went through the whole song without uttering a sound. They faced Alberta in the final. En route, other than their loss to Nova Scotia, Alberta had beaten Newfoundland 7-0 and Manitoba 4-0. The game was a classic, pitting the nation's best offensive team against the nation's best defense. It also matched the haves against the have-nots. BC came out in their matched provincial sweatsuits, covered smartly by their provincial rain gear. Our team wore their only uniforms, which, by the way, they had paid for themselves, and borrowed maroon monsoon raincoats with SMOO printed boldly across the backs. This was a team which had made overnight trips with 8 in a car. They certainly weren't going to let uniforms bother them. They wore little powder blue skirts picked out by trained Mullane. They became so waterlogged that Beazley and Langley discarded theirs and played in their unadorned bloomers in the second half. The field was ringed with the keenest spectators in the country, many of them school kids who came to see their teachers play. The crowd, said by some to be the largest to ever watch a field hockey game in Canada, was led by the cheering New Brunswick team in their borrowed Nova Scotian kilts. Kimmer Robson described it as neat, like playing inside a big circle of friends. The umpire became known as One-Armed Logan because every time she blew the whistle, she pointed in Alberta's favor. She wasn't enough to alter the outcome, however, as Nova Scotia repeated Wilfred Hoare's soccer-like defensive tactics, and Katie Didkowski and the Nova Scotia defense booked their 5th straight shutout in 5 games. Once again, in a scene becoming very common to the Blue Nose team, the penalty shots were to decide the outcome. The reporter who wrote up the game described Katie Didkowski, who was about to face 5 penalty shots to determine the Canadian championship, as cool as a cucumber. Well, he couldn't have been there because she was by then running on raw nerves. Perhaps the reporter was merely comparing her to her husband John, who looked more like a drowned Barney Fife by this time. The fans went spastic as Nova Scotia lost the flip, had to go first. Scoring went like this. Hoare put Joni Langley first off the mark. She scored. Alberta scored. Then we missed, and Didkowski stopped the second Alberta shot. And then we missed, and she stopped the third Alberta shot. Score going into the 4th round, 1-1. Boulanger came through again. Then Alberta scored. Score 2-2. Mama Rice was up. She swung the net. The net puffed. Score, Nova Scotia 3, Alberta 2. Kathy Broderick, Alberta's ace, was their last shooter. If she scored, another 5 players would shoot from each side, If she failed to score, the championship was ours. For the first time all day, you could hear the Robie Street traffic. She slammed one, and Katie Didkowski caught it on her pads. Game over, party time. Suffice it to say that the Lighthouse Tavern rocked that night. Rumor has it that even the parents of these heroes, let their hair down as never before. There was singing in the aisles, there was dancing on the tables, there was even an official Lighthouse Canadian citizenship awarded to a crew of Russian sailors, one of whom stole Katie Didkowski's new leather jacket. It's my pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to present to you our final inductees to the Nova Scotia Sport Heritage Centre Hall of Fame, the hardest practicing, hardest partying, hardest playing team in the annals of Nova Scotian sport, the 1974-75 Canadian Championship Field Hockey Team.
At this time, we would call upon Mr. Cameron MacKinnon from the Board of Directors to come forward and join us on stage for the presentation. Well, we're not going to be able, obviously, to interview every single member of this swashbuckling team that Sandy referred to, but I think we ought to start with the coach. Will Hoare, congratulations. You and I have had discussions about this over the years, and you have to be a very proud man tonight.
I've been very proud of these people all the time, for the last 20 years.
You have indeed.
Yes.
Were you offended at all by Nancy's description of you as he was impressive in a funny old English way? It wasn't funny to you.
Oh, yes, it was.
Oh, was it really?
Oh, yes, it was, because it proved my point that we could win in 3 years. Because if my funny old English way was good enough to win a national championship, then I'd already noticed how bad everybody else was playing.
How did you do it? You know, it wasn't an easy job.
To me, it was easy. Yeah. Yeah, because, well, to tell you the honest truth, I used to go out and umpire field hockey when I was living in Greenwood, or soccer. And when I watched the way people were playing field hockey, I said to myself, well, they're living in the past. So if I could find a bunch of people who could play hockey the way they were playing in 1970 instead of 1930, and I had a job to convince them at first. You know, I used to say to them, you've got to go hunting in twos, and they didn't know what on earth I was talking about, mobility and all kinds of things like that. Expressions they'd never heard. They were still playing, if the right winger was running around the line, then she'd be tiptoeing down the line, even if I was next to her, because she was afraid to move, because everybody had always said, you're the right winger, you stay on that line, you never move. So the first thing I had to do was convince them that they could go anywhere anywhere on the field. The second thing was that and Kathy Mullane's here, if somebody passes you, there must be a hole behind you, go back and fill it. And the third one was, as Sandy said, into touch. Kathy Mullane said, into touch, what do you mean, into touch? I said, if you're in trouble, kick the ball into touch. Everybody else will come back. And basically, that's all we did. We just changed the game around, and they worked like nobody's business. The other thing is that there are funny lot of people, you know that. You know some of them.
You had to.
You know some of them personally, but the thing about it is that they responded. They responded very, very quickly. They never knew, the thing was, they never knew they were working hard because when we started off, as Sandy said, we ran 2,000 meters or yards on one training program at the beginning. By the time we got round to the championships, they were doing 6,000 yards in training. But the thing was this, that every time they did anything, they did it with a ball. And if you give hockey players a ball, they'll play with it forever. And they never bothered about the running. But in addition to that, we also played rugby, and we played cricket, and we played everything else. And some days we just went down there and everybody turned up, and we played for 10 minutes. I said, right, you can all go home. We don't need to do it today.
Shocked them.
Yeah, shocked them.
Who will be the spokesperson for this team?
Nancy.
Nancy. What kind of a game were you guys playing before Wilf took over?
Boring.
In a word.
In a word, boring. He made it exciting.
Yeah.
We learned how to play differently, I guess, is all I can say.
Yeah.
And we had more fun, I suppose.
And he got the message across in that funny old English way.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's not so funny.
No, I don't remember saying that.
You're a great story. That was an incredible accomplishment. And as somebody once wrote, it did change the face of field hockey.
Yes, it did. It modernized the game, I guess, maybe, for this part of the country.
What is the state of the game today?
Uh,
Time to regroup another group. Well, you'll have to...
Pathetic in Nova Scotia.
Really?
Yeah, you know, and the answer is a very simple one. Schools would not buy hockey sticks for girls. You can play soccer with a ball. So everybody switched to soccer. All you need is a ball. Because they couldn't afford to buy hockey sticks. It never occurred to anybody to say, right, we're having a field hockey team, but you girls will have to buy your own stick. And everybody now plays soccer. Now then, if we were to take some of those girls who play soccer now and change them into hockey players, we'd beat everybody everywhere.
Take it from the boss. Who's going to argue with that man? Ladies and gentlemen, a great, great team. National champions, every one of them. And I think an even better story is that they have stayed so close together as a team and as a unit and as personal friends over the years. Thank you.